Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is another Dark Souls 2 patch notes analysis / observational video. Once again, we're in that familiar territory of the DLC is just around the corner, and along with the DLC there are a handful of changes that are happening. It says here this is patch 1.7 and the calibration will be 1.10. I don't pay too much heed to these numbers though because I've got them wrong before and it can be a little bit confusing, but suffice to say this is the most recent patch we will be picking up for Dark Souls as of the end of August, sorry. And what I'm reading from here is the retranslations of the original translations on Reddit, and apparently this is a little bit more concise, a little bit less Englishy. So I'll leave a link to it in the description for people who want to read the full brunt of the notes, because I'm just going to go down it, give you my impressions, and share this information with the people that want to know it. So, the very first point on this rather long list is in the Undead Crypt, problems were corrected where the bell that summons the Lady of Pyromancers no longer rings if you hit it repeatedly. So, a PvE change for the most, but sometimes useful in PvP. That has now been changed, and that is the only directly patched thing. It's the only part of the game that has been directly changed. The rest of this is all changes that can be done through the regulation changes. So, the first of the regulations here is, in online multiplayer, critical damage against other players is reduced. So this is a very, very big one. If you think back, folks, to all the veterans who played Dark Souls 1, got into Dark Souls 1's PvP, the criticals in that game took a massive nerf because they were insanely powerful, and especially when you combined them with a ring that was called the Hornet Ring, which increased your criticals. So by the end of that game's life cycle, the criticals had taken a massive dive in terms of their damage. They were still insanely powerful, and there were ways to make them even more so, but they took a nosedive, and Dark Souls 2's criticals were one of the strongest things in the game by far, because when you think of criticals, it's not just backstabber, guys, it's riposts, it's guard breaks, it's all of that good stuff, which tells you straight away that it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult and a little bit more skill intensive to kill people in PvP. That is a good thing. It makes the fights last a little bit longer. It's probably a bad thing if you're in a gank and you want to get rid of somebody really quickly. It'll have a very large effect on the way you play the game and on how encounters take place. Is it for the best? Possibly, because there are a lot of people that, you know, are using the backup daggers to riposte with and to guard break with, and it can sometimes feel not so much like you've been cheated, but when you were waiting for an invasion for quite a long time and then you get into it and you mismanage your stamina and end up taking a guard break riposte and you instantly get killed, and you feel like, you know, if you'd not been so silly with your stamina you might have had a decent fight with the player that you know, ruthlessly punished you. So it's going to definitely increase the viability of great fights, I like to think, as opposed to the players who have the mentality of, I want to do whatever I can to kill the person as quickly as I can, as if they were garbage men taking out the trash. But the next one is weapons, armour, other equipment and spells are generally rebalanced. So below this is quite an extensive list of information. It's not quite as big as the last one we did, but I'm going to go through this and tell you what it is. So, the Cleric's Palmer, the Cleric's Small Shield, Magic Shield, Cursed Bone Shield, Spirit Tree Shield, Golden Wing Shield, Shield of the Insolent, Grand Spirit Tree Shield have increased spell parry duration and angle. So this is really interesting, and I haven't tested it myself, but I intend to. Each of these shields that it's just mentioned have the ability to deflect spells when fired at them. It's essentially parrying magic, and when I first heard of this technique, I thought it was going to completely change the way I played the game, because I'm somebody who really enjoys the mechanics of parrying. At the time, didn't realise just how frustrating the parrying would be in this game thanks to the delay that they intentionally added to it, so it was something I never really did too much. But I have practiced with it in my time, and it is definitely something interesting, but it was never viable, because the spells went wherever they wanted to. It was literally just a random bounce. And I'm hoping, with the looks of this, not only have they made it easier to parry, but I'm hoping they've made it so that the angle itself is back at the person who's casting the spell. You know, I think that would be so cool if that's the way it worked, and I'm hoping it does. But the next one is the King's Mirror has increased spell parry duration. I didn't even realise this weapon had spell parry, I just assumed it reflected things off the front of the shield. so I'm not too sure how that works. I've never used that shield. I'm not a big Great Shield user, especially the fucking Ultra Great Shields, or whatever the hell they categorise that as. But the Defender's Shield, Havel's Great Shield, Germ Great Shield, Dragon Rider Great Shield, Rebel's Great Shield have reduced stability. So, my gut feeling on this is bad. These shields, aside from the Defender's one, I don't really remember the Dragon Rider Great Shield. Oh, I do. I tell you, it's the one that's shaped like the silly egg, isn't it, that the fat bastard has in hides. Everyone but the Defender's Shield here does exactly what it's meant to do, just like the horn on that car just then. They all are heavy, generally have quite high requirements on statistics, but they do what they're intended to do. They stop damage. They are shields. They are great shields. They are called great shields for a very good reason. And they are very powerful, but they have their weaknesses, and that's why the guard break is so important and such an interesting addition to the game. Reducing stability on shields that take, you know, quite a lot of dedication to have, unless you're a max level player, but we're not going there, seems a little silly to me, because you're taking away the very strength of what those things are designed to do. Have people been complaining about these particular shields? Has there suddenly been a resurgence of great shields dominating PvP? I'm not entirely sure. But if you remember, in Dark Souls 1, the Eagle Shield was so goddamn powerful that they decided to tweak that, and one of the things they didn't tweak in that game was the stability. So it makes it very strange that they would do so here, and I'm curious as to people's thoughts on exactly why this is, or if you have any experience of what this has changed, because I've never used a Great Shield. Ever. In my entire time playing Dark Souls 2, which is combined at this point, it's probably about 500 hours. I haven't touched it for the longest times, and I have no ambition to until the DLCs drop, but I still have quite a lot of time invested in it, and I've never used one, so I just wouldn't know. Right, Germ Helm, Germ Warrior Helm, Germ Warrior Great Helm, Jesus Christ, Smelter Demon Helm, the stats, Black Witch's Robes have reduced defense. This is another interesting one. I'm not too sure why they're wanting to hit these pieces of armour. I can't really say that these pieces particularly have stood out to me as the ones that have been devastatingly popular and made such a difference. Strange. Sanctum Priestess Tiara had its descriptions fixed, in Japanese only, so that's not something for us. Ooh, this is cool. Stone Ring has increased effect. So, it's cool, but it's ironic, isn't it, when you think about it. Dark Souls 2, a game where poise has started to perhaps be something, as opposed to being nothing, even though a lot of people who are up the arse of this game will tell you that it works exactly as it was designed, which is another way of saying it doesn't fucking work because it wasn't designed. Poise kind of does something now. It didn't used to, now it does, so this might have greater impetus, but isn't it funny we have a ring to artificially increase our poise crush on the Dark Souls games, where poise is nowhere near as important. If this ring existed in Dark Souls 1, armour and poise breaks limits would have been something that you were never certain or never safe to have, because you would have never known if somebody was wearing that ring until they got you in a stun lock and hurt you badly, or they put you in a bad situation where you thought you could tank something and you couldn't. It would have completely flipped the meta and the mind games on its head. Unfortunately, that game doesn't have that ring. Instead, the inferior Dark Souls 2 does, and I'm saying inferior in as much as the poise mechanic. I know a lot of people really like Dark Souls 2, and that's perfectly fine. They are both great games in their own rights, but poise-wise, Dark Souls 2 is completely inferior in the way it works. So this ring has increased effect. Will it make any difference? I sincerely hope so. Do I think it will? Do I hell? Red Tier Stone Ring, changed to no longer affect spells. So I'm saying it right now. Whoever it is who originally changed the Red Tier Stone Ring from how it worked in both Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and in Demon Souls it was the cat ring, wasn't it? Still the same functionality, you could use the Morion Blade, there were so many different things in that game that allowed you to have this effect. Whoever it was who somehow didn't like that and changed it to the way it works now should be slapped, or fired, or slapped and then fired, because that person to me does not understand what this ring is about and just how important it has always been to the game. And there are people right now scratching their head thinking, I've never even used this ring, why would I want to be so close to death? Well, the point of this ring is it balances itself. It is not overpowered because you have to be one hit away from death to use it. That is the point. The trade-off is you either do not get hit or you die. And in that duration of time where you weren't dying, you were able to do a counter-attack. It had a fantastic, turn of events in PvP when somebody had that glow and immediately they just either crushed you or they evened the odds and they made that super awesome comeback. And in PvE, it enabled the skilled players to destroy. In this game, it's absolutely fucking worthless. And now, they've just made it even more worthless for no other reason than it was a shit ring to begin with, we'll make it even shitter. And the thing that offends me the most is they don't even have +2 version of it, which is the original version of the Red Tearstone ring. Like, they could have changed it so that when you equipped it, you immediately went down into Red Tearstone range, so that you could never wear it and still have full life, to cripple it even more, to make it more balanced, but they didn't. They just decided to make it so that you get an extra 50 damage on your hits. Thanks. Thanks a bunch. Tell that to Artorias when you got an extra 500 damage on your hits. But I don't understand why they've done what they've done. I don't really hear anything on the forums that I used to check about the Red Tearstone ring being such a thing. There are far more important rings for PvP, far more important rings for PvE. Strange. Ring of Steel Protection has increased effect against enemies. No change when against other players. So I find this really strange. The way that they've split this ring so that it has these passive buffs against the AI but not against other humans is a really interesting way in balancing things. Bringing it back to the Tearstone ring, feasibly couldn't they have done the same thing? They could have had the Tearstone ring be its former glory against the AI and its new watered down, neutered, castrated variant against people. But even then I'd still not like it because it takes away the joy of what it was. So clear Bluestone ring +2 has reduced effect. I'm not too sure what this ring does. I think, does it speed up your casting speeds? Or does it give you more attunement slots? I think it's casting speed. I should really check it, but once again folks, it's one of those things that I've just read it to you and you immediately know because you're deep in the game and you're probably using it yourself, so you know what that means and you know how it's going to affect you and you're probably quite curious. The cool thing about something like this is you can always pump more points to get your casting speed up, and there are also quite a few outfits that help you increase it as well. Will it be as overpowered as it was when you had the blue stone ring on? Probably not, but still. Alright, Soul Spear has reduced casting speed and damage to poise. Interesting. So there's a few like this, guys, so I'll just list them off. Crystal Soul Spear does the same, requires more slots and has increased uses. Soul Geyser and Soul Shower have reduced damage to poise. Strong Magic Shield has reduced stability effect. So all those sorceries are being affected, and there's an emphasis on poise here. I believe when you get hit by these spells, it automatically flinches you. And I think that's what they're trying to stop, but thinking back, magic is very powerful in this game. Magic's always been powerful, but in Dark Souls 1 it was decidedly more difficult to use in some forms because it missed a lot and it was easy to dodge, but if it did hit, it hit like a truck. And that's kind of the whole point of magic, isn't it? So that when you hit them, you do get the stun. So to take the stun away is definitely going to change the way that mages and sorcerers think about the way they play, because they'll have to. But the next part is mentioning miracles. It says the Lightning Spear, Great Lightning Spear, Sunlight Spear, Emit Force, Blinding Bolt, Heavenly Thunder have reduced damage to poise. So once again, another emphasis on poise. Poise is apparently a big thing in this patch, which is a good thing, I like to think. We'll soon see. The next one, Sacred Oath. When casting on yourself will remove other buffs that you have casted on yourself. Interesting. So Sacred Oath, if you don't know what it does, it's kind of like a really, really useful be-all, end-all kind of buff that you can cast that gives you, I think it's like a damage increase, a defense increase. I used to see it a lot in the arena. I never used it myself, but you saw it a lot in the arena. It looked like a big halo above the people that was cascading rays of light down, and it gave them generally a bit of a nice glow, and it buffed them. So now you can't have any other buffs happening while that happens to balance it out, because you did see people stacking things along the lines of Great Magic Barrier and all that kind of good stuff, so, you know, doubling up on the buffs. And I always find this kind of information quite funny, because in Dark Souls 1 they understood that certain weapons shouldn't be buffed, they understood that certain effects should not be able to be chained together, yet Dark Souls 2 seemed to completely forget all these fantastic nuances that twisted the original in such a fine way. So I find that strange that it's taken them so long to realise that you shouldn't be able to stack so many fucking buffs. But Bountiful Sunlight, when casted on yourself, will do the exact same as Sacred Oath. It will remove the other buffs that you have on yourself, so you'll no longer be able to stack Sacred Oath and Bountiful Sunlight, get your life back and get that nice damage increase and defense increase and all those other effects that it does, which I'm not too familiar of because it's been a while. Pyromancy. Fire Whip has reduced damage to poise. Another one here. See, that I disagree with immediately, because if you think about Fire Whip, very difficult to land on people, and the whole point of it is if you land the first hit, you generally land the two of them because you made them flinch. Now it looks like people will be able to get out of the Fire Whip, making it useless. Not really something you want to hear on a spell that's already quite eclectic as it is. You know, unless there's been this sweeping zeitgeist of Fire Whip users destroying people, I don't really understand that. But then on to the hexes and the end of this analysis of the patch notes. Affinity, Scraps of Life, Resonant Soul, Great Resonant Soul and Climax have reduced damage to poise. So it's almost like they want these spells to just graze you now, it would seem. I wonder why this is. Curious and curiouser. But yeah, you're no longer going to be able to try and... I mean, you could never really stunlock with spells because the casting speed, regardless of how much you boosted it, was still too slow for them to roll out of. But Numbness, when casted on yourself, once again, like everything else apparently, will remove any other buffs you have currently. So, no longer able to combo Numbness. And then Resonant Flesh. When casted on yourself, will do the exact same as Numbness. So now, there's a whole host of these magics that I assume people have been going 2 to 3 deep with that are no longer able to do that. But that is the patch notes, guys. Interesting to say the least. Once again, it has to be said, they are patching a lot of really interesting and nuanced things, but are they the right things? Because I don't think they are. And still, I mean, how many of these have I covered? Is this my 3rd, 4th patch notes that I've brought to you now? Still, not a single thing, aside from maybe the stunlock, has been addressed of the issues that this game has in response to its player versus player component. They still haven't fixed some of the things that have turned a lot of experienced players away, and I'm kind of stunned that they're messing around on such a critical level with things that, like, some of this stuff I doubt people even use. Does anybody use the mirror shield to reflect shit? I don't think I know anybody who does. There are glaring holes with this game, and a lot of the people playing it now have learnt to accept them, like we did with the original Dark Souls, and that's fine for them, but there's a lot of people who just cannot stand playing the game because of quite a lot of issues that could probably quite easily be tweaked, and From are showing absolutely no interest in doing so, and that speaks volumes, because it means that the game at this moment in time is the exact way they envisioned it being. The only problems that they feel are the ones they've tweaked here, which makes me very sad. But how does it make you feel? Do you think this is appropriate? Do you think they're fixing the right things? Do you think this is ultimately better for the community and for the people still balls deep in Souls? Because I just don't know. But thank you anyway for watching. Hopefully this has been insightful, and as always, you take care now.